So, as I said before, I really do want to thank you all for taking the time and taking the effort to come here today to learn and hear about this subject on karma. The idea of bad karma and suffering, I think, in reality, when a person is honest, everybody can relate to that. Because behind every single closed door, in every suburb, in every town, in every city on this planet, somebody is suffering. Somebody is experiencing pain on a physical or emotional or mental platform. So everybody can relate to the idea of suffering in this world. There's a band called REM. They're a rock and roll band in America, and in 1993 they released a song, and it was called Everybody Hurts. I don't know if you guys know that song. It was actually it was a very interesting song, because sometimes people, when they write songs or they write poetry, they will actually write about the reality of problems. They don't know what to do with it, but they will write about it, what the problem is. And I think that song by REM was a very nice song in the sense it's really expressing. Because in it they say, because everybody cries. Everybody hurts sometimes. And everybody who came to their concert and listened to that song, they all related to it. Because it's true. If you want to be honest with yourself, it's actually true. So, we're going to look at, in this very short class, a huge subject. And I've got really low technology happening here. This is not digital in any way. I've just got a chart, and I've printed out some of the quotes that I'll be saying through it as we go through it. So let's look at what we're going to be doing in this class. So the first part will be around 45 minutes, maybe a little bit less. And we're going to do a definition of karma. We're going to go, well, who is it that's incurring karma? And I don't mean I'm naming this person and that person. Who is it that's actually incurring the karma? So that you'll understand what I mean when we get into that. Karma and reincarnation, because actually you can't just talk about the laws of karma without talking about the laws of reincarnation, because they're entwined with each other. Then we're going to have a question and answers time. So if you've got any questions coming from what we've spoken about, please ask them. Then we're going into part 2, which is the cause of reincarnation. But all this is just pointing out the problems. The last part is talking about akarma, which is the solution. So, and then we'll have a questions and answers time again. So please, if you've got any questions as we go through, please ask them in the 2 spots we have there. And if you asked a question in here, and I think I'm going to cover it here, I'll just beg for you to please wait till we get on to the second part. If I don't cover it, your question, ask it again, please do. No problem whatsoever, yeah? So that gives us a little overview of what we're going to be doing today, okay? And I really want you guys to get involved in it, in asking questions, because questions really lead to things that are very real for people. But I also want to state, we're only doing 2-hour class, 1.5, 2-hour class on a huge subject. So just take into account, we're skimming the surface. We're on like a speed ride, yeah? A speed ride through this huge subject. But I still think it'll be of value to you, for you to understand when people talk about karma, what exactly do they mean? Okay. So, let's start with our first part, which is really a definition of karma. which I spoke of before, that it's a Sanskrit word coming from the Vedic texts, and it means cause and effect, action and reaction. You can't have a reaction without there having been an action. It's very logical, isn't it? So when people are experiencing karma, it's because of something that took place before. And this is actually very interesting. Once we get into understanding about karma, in the English language, the word that we would use would be the word fate. Yeah, maybe people, and that's why they get confused about what karma actually means, because in English, and maybe coming from the Christian tradition, we'd use the word fate. Oh, it's a person's fate that happened. But it's not the same, because fate denotes that something just happens to you, doesn't it? It doesn't denote that you previously did something that then that's why it's happened. So that's why it's a difference. Fate is not the picture, the whole picture. It's just really addressing the reaction. So when people don't understand, why did this happen to me? And somebody will go, oh, that was your fate. That's not the whole picture, is it? So that's why we're going to put aside the whole concept of fate, because it's not addressing the beginning. You know, you go along to a good doctor, a holistic doctor, and they'll go back to why you got sick. They'll treat your symptoms now, but they'll want to know why you got sick and treat the whole thing, right? So that's what we're going to look at today with karma, the whole picture. Okay. So let's start. Let's start with, I'm actually going to turn my first pages. Okay, so that's what I just spoke about. Before I get into it, when you start to understand this whole in a broad sense, what karma means, and you start to understand it's because of something that you did previously that you are now reaping the reactions, whether it's good or bad. You start to really understand that you are responsible. That's a huge thing, especially nowadays. If you go back 30, 40 years ago in society, people were much more willing to take responsibility for their actions. But gradually now in society, it has crept in that you don't take responsibility for your actions. It's always somebody else's fault. I have to say that unfortunately a lot of children are raised nowadays that whenever they do something wrong, it's because of somebody else's. It's their parents' fault, it's the teachers at school fault, or it's the government's fault. It's not. You have to take responsibility for your own actions, your own decisions in life. So understanding karma really starts to put you in a more responsible position in your own life, and it takes away anger. It genuinely does. And I'll give you an example of that. Many years ago when I was living in Sydney, I got very ill, and it turned out I had shingles. But it turned out to be the worst recorded case of shingles in Australia. I always win awards like that. So I had shingles, and it very quickly progressed, right up here in my head, behind my ears, down my arms. It progressed to the point where I was paralysed down one side of my body. So it was and the pain level was unbelievable. So the doctor came to our house, and he saw, like he'd never seen a case like this before. It was like blisters on top of blisters, sort of thing. And he said the level of pain medication that I would need would be what they were giving to cancer patients in hospitals that were near the end stages. And I was pregnant at the time. I was 3 months pregnant at the time, and he said, so you have to abort your child because this pain medication will deform the child, sort of thing. And I said, no, I'm not going to do that. And he went away. He came back the next day and he said, you have to do that. You cannot go through what you're going to go through without pain medication. I said, I will not kill my child. And he said, I wash my hands of responsibility of you. He drove away in his Lamborghini and never came back. So obviously I went through the next couple of months to the point where I said I was paralysed. I had to be hand-fed and bathed and everything. And the level of pain was enormous. It got to a point where my husband went and found somebody. It was actually an acupuncturist who was willing to come and give it a go, because most people get to a point they're a bit scared to touch such a situation in case they end up being in trouble, you know. But he came to the house and he was giving me Chinese medicine and things like that, and he actually saved my eyesight so I didn't go blind and things like that. But when I was he was coming every second day. He was very wonderful. But when I was at the point where I could start speaking, he said to me, why aren't you angry? Because he could see I wasn't angry at all. And he said, I have treated many people with very high levels of pain and suffering, and they always get angry at some point. Why aren't you angry? And I said, because I know this happened to me because of something that I did. So how can I get angry at other people? It's self-induced. It's my own actions, and here's the reaction. Therefore, I just have to accept it and know why. And I actually wasn't angry. So when you take responsibility for your own actions, anger goes out the door. And what is there instead is self-analysis of what am I doing? Why am I doing these actions? Because I will have to accept responsibility for the reactions. So it's a very practical thing, understanding the laws of karma. It's very, very practical in everybody's life. And that's why you'll see people, Asian people, where this understanding of karma is in society, maybe not very deeply, but to some degree. And enormous things happen to people, but they seem very stoic. And it's because they have an understanding there, to some degree, that what happens to them is because of something that they have done. And it's not even something that's in this lifetime. That's why we have to go into the understanding of reincarnation. If you don't understand reincarnation, you go, I didn't do anything that I can remember that deserves this. Well, that's because you don't remember. You only remember back a little way, don't you? So that's what we're going to get into. Oh, not ready for that one. Okay, so as I said before, there's one other thing too. When people don't accept responsibility for their actions, what are they doing? They're always pointing somewhere else, aren't they? It's their fault, it's their fault, it's their fault, and they're pointing the finger somewhere else. And sometimes they've got their finger up going, it's God's fault too. It's their fault and it's God's fault. But guess what? You've got 3 fingers pointing back at yourself. Don't forget that. So you've really got to take things back to yourself, okay? So let's look at what's a very important part and the beginning foundation. You cannot talk about karma unless you talk about who is it that's incurring the karma. that is such an important foundation. If somebody's talking to you about karma and they don't explain that, you'll never understand karma. It's who is, and I don't mean your name and your address, it's you, the soul within the body. You're transmigrating from body to body. If you adjust the body, let's take it from that platform, you're just this body. These chemicals that you can see, skin, bone, blood. If you adjust the body, well, guess what? The scientists know that every 5, 6, 7 years, you have a complete new set of chemicals wrapped around the soul. A complete new set of chemicals. When you look in the mirror every 5 years, it kind of looks the same, maybe a little bit of degradation, but it kind of looks the same, doesn't it? But it's actually a completely new set of molecules that are making up the body, even the molecules, the atoms that are making up those molecules. When the scientists examine every part of the body, so you're getting a new casing every 5 years. But you are the constant person that's in there. When you look at an old photograph album, or nowadays if you go on the cloud and look at old digital photos, when you look at old photos of yourself taken maybe 20 years ago or something, and you see an old photo, you actually remember. A lot of the time you remember the people that were around you. You remember the old house that's behind you, or the old car. You remember being there. But that body has dissipated all over the place many times. It's gone down the toilet. It's gone all over the place. But you know that you were there because you are the soul, the eternal soul, encased in this temporary body that keeps changing all the time. So if you're the body, why on earth would this set of chemicals be incurring karma from a set of chemicals 5 years ago that performed? It doesn't make sense, does it? If there's one set of laws there that are really stringent, but the other one's all really fuzzy, like it's just a different set of chemicals all over the place. But they're going to have to suffer something that a different set of chemicals that went down the toilet performed a couple of years ago. No, it doesn't make sense because it's not true. The truth is that we are the soul within, encased in this body, and we are held responsible for the actions that we perform. So that's a very important foundation to start with when you're understanding karma. So, as I was saying before, the body that you have is made up of these, what they call grosser. I don't mean gross as in, oh gosh. It's grosser material elements. Earth, water, fire, and air. And then ether's getting more subtle, isn't it? But that's what's making up this body here that you can see. And then there is what is called a subtle body. This is the yogic understanding. Within the gross body that we can see, there is actually a subtle body that's in the same shape. And it is made of mind, intelligence, and false ego. Now this is really I'm really skipping over, this is really getting in depth into the yoga understanding of the self. And then there is the soul, the eternal soul. But our bodies, we have two bodies. What's called a gross material body that you can see, that's what they burn. When they take it to the crematorium, they burn the body that's made of earth, water, fire, and air. And then you have this subtle body, mind, intelligence, and false ego. And at the time of death, a person leaves their body, the soul leaves their body encased in the subtle body. Mind, intelligence, and it's encased in the subtle body. And then by the laws of nature, you go into your next womb, encased in the subtle body. And you start again. The gross body starts growing around you, according to whatever womb that you went into. Okay, according to what you deserved, your karma deserved. So, because the soul is wrapped in the mind, intelligence, and false ego, what comes with the mind and intelligence is the karma from that lifetime. And you go to your next life and it's all played out. You take it with you. That's the track there, right? You take it with you in your next life, that set of karma, of things that you did in your last life that you didn't reap the benefits from yet. So this is why, even in this lifetime, if you do something good, you might get that good karma back pretty quickly, or you might have to wait until your next life to get it back, or so on, right? And reverse it with bad karma. Now that we're talking about karma and lifetimes, we're talking about reincarnation. But karma, basically I'm simplifying it down to there's two kinds of karma. There's called prarabdha karma, which is karma that's fructifying in this lifetime. You're experiencing good and bad karma right now and tomorrow and next week. That's fructifying either from before in this lifetime or in other lifetimes. It's all coming through, right? And there's kriyamana. That is karma that you're accumulating right now that is either going to fructify in the next couple of years or whatever, or in your next life. Okay, so there's, in a sense, two kinds of karma. Stuff that's fructifying right now and stuff you're accumulating for your future. This is the reality of the very stringent laws of nature. Laws of nature are not open to any kind of bribery. You can bribe a government, you can bribe somebody, but you cannot bribe the laws of nature. They are very stringent. So that is why for every action that you perform, there is a reaction. There is a reaction either immediately, short-term, or long-term in your next lives. It's a very serious subject, isn't it? So when you see people make a joke out of the word karma, it's not actually a joke. It's very serious. Like all the laws of nature are very serious. They're very stringent and they're very serious. And you can see that when people become quite irreverent of the laws of nature and they go against the laws of nature, there's always problems. That's what pollution is, isn't it? We're going against the laws of nature. So what do we get? We get pollution. It's not like you can do it and there's no reaction. So we understand it on various levels, the stringent laws of nature, but it also applies very personally in our lives. Once you start to understand this, you start to understand a very common question that people have. Now, I in no way whatsoever want to denigrate anybody's suffering, because suffering is real. It's not something to be discarded and go, nah, it's your fault, you did something. Suffering is very real, and the yogis, actually, their hearts are very much touched and affected by any suffering that anybody feels. So even though they understand why it's happening. So I'm not going to make light of this subject, but once you start to understand it, that question that people have, why does one child be born in a very fortunate circumstance and another child is born in a very unfortunate circumstance? Because if you're just looking at them as a one-off lifetime event, that child's just born. They haven't done anything to anybody, have they? They've just come out of the mother's womb. They haven't been little Hitlers or anything. They've just come out, but they've got an arm missing, or they've got a leg missing, or whatever. And in the next room, a woman gives birth to a baby that's perfectly formed. And she's in a very rich situation. All the good fortune is there, material fortune. Why? Why is that happening? If you don't recognise and understand both the law of karma and the law of reincarnation, you throw your hands up in the air and go, it's not fair. And in Christianity, a lot of people will go to their minister or to the priest, and they will say, why is this happening? And what will the minister say? It's a mystery. Yeah? It's true. Because they don't know how to answer this. Because the only other thing you've got is God is cruel. And they don't want to say that. Because what else are they going to say? That God went, you're going to be born without an arm. You're going to be born like this. You're going to be born like... He doesn't. He doesn't. Actually, the Supreme Lord is our dearest friend. He doesn't want this to happen. But we perform activities in our past lives, and by the stringent laws of nature, this is what happens to us. He is saddened by all of that, and he wants us to wake up and understand the situation we've put ourselves into. He didn't put us into this situation, we did. It's called free will. So, in a lot of cultures on this planet, where there is Buddhism, Hinduism, different places, people have a sort of an overview understanding of karma. In Christianity, it's one of the stumbling blocks for us. And it unfortunately leads people to become atheists, which is a great disservice. But I would like to look at, first of all, before we go on, there's actually no conflict with the understanding of karma and Christianity. So if people feel uncomfortable with that, there's actually no conflict, because I'd like to go back into the history in Christianity. One of the fathers of Christianity, his name was Origen. I think I've got it here. Oh yeah, I forgot to tell you that. They did a survey in 2016 in America of people, asking them if they believed in reincarnation or they were open to the idea of reincarnation. And 40% of adults in America said yes, they either believed in it or they were totally open to the idea. Now, out of those 40% of adults, 21% of them were actually Christians that were actually open or believed in the idea of reincarnation, which goes against what they've kind of been taught. But they're feeling, this is how I can understand things then, by understanding that. So if we go back into the history of the Christian church, there was, I'll get to that, there was Origen was one of the founding fathers of Christianity. This is after Lord Jesus Christ left. He was one of the founding fathers. And if you go, anybody who's into history, whether they're monks or priests or lay people, and they go back and study the beginnings of the Christian church, they will definitely come right up against with Origen, because he was a huge force in the forming of the Christian church. And he was around about, I've got it written down here, 185 to 254 AD. So it's 185 years after Jesus left. He was born. So he was around 200, 250 years after Jesus. But he was helping really gather together this whole thought of Christianity in that. And he very much taught reincarnation. It was actually part of the Christian philosophy, was reincarnation, because it is reality. So it was very much included in Christianity. So he was teaching about reincarnation. But you've got to understand, if you look back all that time ago in Europe, Christianity is forming. It's forming over there in Europe. And what happened was that a lot of lay people started to take spiritual life a little bit more as not an urgent part of their life, because they're going, well, you know, I'll just get serious in my next life because this is not a one-off shot. I'll just get serious in my next life. And this was starting to spread. This idea was starting to spread. And so the Christian church was going, this is not good. People are starting to take this more and more frivolously. And so, 300 years after it had been taught in the Christian time, they got together in Constantinople for a huge gathering of the bishops and all the top people, the cardinals, and they got together and made an edict in 543. So we're talking about 500 years after Jesus, 550 years after Jesus, 300 years after Origen had been speaking. And they decided at this big conference the best way to move forward and to get the lay people to be serious is say it's a one-off shot. Get it together now or you burn in hell forever. This is like really putting fear into people, right? So it was actually introduced into the Christian teaching 500 years after Jesus, right? And you can historically go back to those records and see exactly who, you know, all the people that were there, what went on. This is not fantasy or anything. It's actually true, part of the historical records. And what they had to do was then decry Origen and say he was a heretic. And then say if anybody, they issued, if anybody ever declares reincarnation, they're going to hell. So that then came into the whole Christian church, and it's been there ever since. But the problem is, as you can see, 21% of the 40% of people in America, 21% of them are Christians, and going, look, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense that there isn't reincarnation. Because then why are little children suffering? They haven't done anything wrong. But when you understand reincarnation and karma, you know we don't come with a clean slate every lifetime. We come with a slate that's got a tick list on it already. It's got a tick list from our last life and maybe a few past lives. Maybe we don't even clear them all in one lifetime. So when you see sometimes the justice system fails us in societies, no matter how good our societies are, democracies and that, sometimes the justice system fails us, and you'll see somebody get off for murder because he had a good lawyer. And you go, that's not fair. Well, it's not. It's not fair. It's not the best outcome, is it? But the reality is he's still got that on his tick list. Whatever he did wrong, if he murdered somebody, if he raped somebody, it's on his tick list. And it would be more to his advantage for him to go to jail in this lifetime and wipe off some of that. But if he's got a good lawyer, all that does is it shifts it to the next life. So all those good lawyers who are earning big bucks by getting people off who are actually guilty, they're really not working in that person's best interests. So if I go back to just to finish off on in the Christian vein, because we come from a Christian-based society. If we were a Buddhist society, I'd be speaking from that angle, or whatever. But a Christian-based society, I'm speaking from that angle. But if you read in, so nearly all of it disappeared out of the New Testament. Nearly all of it was just taken out. Because you remember they had total control in those days. The only people who wrote were the monks and some people very high up in society. Your lay person didn't read or write, remember, so they could very easily take out what was there. But there are a couple of things left in the New Testament, and one of them is when Paul, who's Jesus' disciple, he wrote, "As you sow, so shall you reap." Don't we all know that one, don't we? We all know that one. It's so famous. Now think about it. What is Paul saying? As you sow, so shall you reap. So there you are. You have a little baby just come out of the womb. You didn't see them sowing anything that would reap that reaction. No, because that was from a past life, wasn't it? So he is so wonderfully capturing the laws of karma. As you sow, so shall you reap. I think it's brilliant, actually. And the other one was John, one of the other disciples. He's actually talking about an incident that happened where Jesus was walking through a marketplace with some of his disciples. And as they're walking through, they came across, there was a beggar, and the beggar was blind. And, he's sitting there begging for some food. And so the disciples take the opportunity to ask their teacher. Now, it's very interesting what they asked. Was this beggar born blind due to his actions or the actions of his parents? And Jesus is explaining that in this situation it's not, but they automatically understood the laws of karma and reincarnation, didn't they? Because the beggar was born blind. He wasn't blind in an accident. So they're asking, well, was he born blind because of his actions? Bang. We're talking about reincarnation straight away. So even though when they passed that edict, 543, they didn't quite take out everything. There are a couple of little things snuck through. And when you read them, it adds up. It makes sense. So those 21% of those Americans who are Christians, they're tapping into that, going, yeah, when Paul said that, when John said that, it somehow makes sense now, doesn't it? So I just wanted to go into that a little bit so that if anybody has a very nice Christian background, which I applaud, they will feel more comfortable with the idea that this is not something that is going against the wonderful teachings of Lord Jesus Christ. It's not. It's actually in harmony with what he was teaching. It's just that it's been taken out. When you look at the New Testament, it's actually a very small book, isn't it? It's actually very small. And if you consider that Lord Jesus Christ, from the time he was in his 20s, he was speaking all the time to people. There's really not that much there recorded. There really isn't that much there recorded. So we can't just say it's all in there. Everything's there. It's not. But what Jesus Christ was talking about is in accordance with what's in the yoga scriptures. There's no disharmony there. But the yoga scriptures are so much more vast and give you so much more in-depth explanation and increase your appreciation of the great saints like Lord Jesus Christ, the great sages. So, if I stop there, because that's a good place to stop for question time, does anybody have any questions so far? Yes?
So, for example, this is very simple example, so you know what I'm trying to ask. Let's say if I have a discussion with somebody and I have a perfectly good intention in what I'm saying. However, that person misunderstands me. Would I still occur bad karma with that? So let's say, with good intention, I say something, a person misunderstands it,
and gets upset.
Yeah, gets upset, gets offended, angry, whatever.
Yeah.
Is it my karma or their karma?
Yeah, she's raised a good point, actually. When we think of actions, when you hear, actions and reactions, we think of actions being something like you choose that day to go and pick up your gun and go and shoot somebody or something. We think of the big actions, don't we? But actually the law of karma, it is defined by every single action that you do. The laws of nature, when you've got a computer, and if any of those guys know the back end of computers, how computers work, it's amazing. But it pales into insignificance of the laws of nature. Because the laws of nature are set up by the Supreme Lord, so they're beyond our intelligence. They're beyond anything we can imagine how complicated they are. Just the sun rising every day. Just the sun rising every day is just an amazing accomplishment, and it goes on every day. If you woke up tomorrow morning and the sun didn't come up, who would freak out in this room? We'd all freak out if the sun didn't come up tomorrow morning. We rely automatically on the laws of nature working, don't we? So the laws of karma are very intricate, and they are very personal to every person, and they actually mean every action you do has a reaction. And that can be on a physical level, where you're actually hurting a person or not hurting a person, hurting anything, hurting trees, hurting animals, hurting anything, right? Or not hurting them. And it's on an emotional level. If you emotionally hurt somebody, there is karma coming back on you. You can't get away with any of that. So if you emotionally disturb somebody else, to the degree that you emotionally disturb them, you get that back on you. It's very exacting. It's not like you're going to hurt somebody to this degree that you get back tons. You get back exactly, precisely. So if you do intentionally disturb somebody else, you will get back the reaction. But if your intention was not to disturb them, but they themselves took it as a disturbance, no. Because you're not intentionally going out there in that sense, yeah? But still, you would use your intelligence to try to placate them. Because you don't want to disturb somebody else, yeah? The more you understand it, the more you don't want to do those things to people, yeah? In India, there's some people called Jains. Has anybody ever heard of Jains? You've heard of Jains? Probably about 1,500 years ago, there was a gentleman who wanted to. He understood the laws of karma. Every action has a reaction, and he thought, okay, how can I kind of, in a sense, mechanically get around this? He wanted to figure out a way around this. He came up with this. It's a religion, a system of belief called Jainism. And they don't purposely hurt any body or any creature. That's how they thought they'd get away with not having any karma, right? And they went to the point where the Jain monks would have a cloth over their mouth so they didn't breathe in any creatures. And they would have a broom and they would sweep in front of themselves so they didn't stand on any little creatures, right? It was incredibly strict. But guess what? That doesn't solve it. Just use your intelligence. So you've got a broom and you sweep away all the ants. Where's these little guys going? Yee, boom, yee, boom, yee, boom. And then they go, where's my house? Where's my home? Oh my God! And they get lost and run away. That's not getting rid of not harming, is it? breathing in any flies or anything, any creatures. But in order for your body to be healthy, every moment of every day you have to be killing bad bacteria inside your body, don't you? Isn't that what a good immune system is? If your immune system goes down, what happens? You get really sick because you're not killing all the bacteria that need to be killed. So it's actually every single day and every single moment of every day, you are actually involved in killing others so that your body can go on. So in Jainism, they were kind of trying to address that, but it's not the answer. We're going to come to that at the end, at the last part of this. What is? How can akarma, no karma, how can we achieve that? But Jainism is not the answer. And they would purposely not disturb other people emotionally or anything, yeah. But it's still not the answer to it all. Did that help a little bit? Has everybody got,
What about thoughts? Are they part of that?
Souls?
No, thoughts.
Thoughts, yes. Yes. Look, in the Vedic yoga texts, they say that there is, even when you don't express, you know, you're sitting there looking at something, oh, I'm so envious of her. Her maroon t-shirt, I want that t-shirt, I am so envious of it. Yeah. Yes. But I don't say it to her. I don't say it to her, but I just think it, you know. Yeah. So I actually, there is a small reaction to that. But if I express something to you, then it increases it. So that's why even horrible thoughts we keep inside, that's the best way to do it, okay? Keep the horrible thoughts inside. But there's still a reaction there because it's something that you're choosing to do, you know? I'm choosing to be envious of that red maroon t-shirt she's got. But, yeah, so there is a very small reaction to that, very, very small. Because everything's taken into account, because it's an action.